Good afternoon. The papers for the Module 1 assignment are graded, so I am ready to do your video message for Module 2 of Market 690. I'm going to be covering participation and assignments. First of all, I'd like to thank you and congratulate you. I can't remember the last time I had a class where everyone submitted the initial posting on time and that everyone had at least one engagement posting. So good job. A best practice and something I want to just mention to you is I think it is best to participate early in the week if you can. You never know what the end of the week has in store for you in terms of weather, friends, work commitments, that you get sick, that your computer gets sick, that you have family obligations. None of us know what's coming our way. So the earlier you can get your participation done, the easier it is for you to focus on your paper at the end of the week. This past week, 27% of the engagement postings were done on Sunday afternoon, which means you had to do a paper and postings on the same day. If it were me, I would try to get it done earlier in the week. And I know that's not possible for everyone, but it is a suggestion and a best practice. Critical things that you need to read. Each Monday morning, or usually Monday morning, I post an announcement for the week. It's got critical information in it for you for the upcoming week. So always read instructor announcements. Always read any emails that go out to the whole class, and be sure that you review the grading rubrics before you submit your paper. This week, if you did not look at the rubric, you missed the major components of the paper. When you look at your feedback, don't just look at the points. You may have earned points in Module 1 that will cost you points in the future. So be sure you understand why points were lost so that you can adjust it for the following modules. For participation, you should be using citations and references. You cannot list a source as a reference if it hasn't been cited. Avoid Google and any other search engine. Google tends to get you first into blogs, website selling services, purchase paper sites, none of which are acceptable sources. Use the textbook and business journal articles. You can go directly to business journal article websites. Most of them allow you to look at least current articles, even if you're not a subscriber. And the school library has got lots of business journal articles in it, so learn to use it. Apply and analyze information. Do not just report on information or quote the information. Go beyond the obvious. Share insights, develop conclusions, and provide substantive responses. These are all not acceptable sources: blogs, Wikipedia, dictionaries, encyclopedias, site selling services, and cheat sites. A basic rule of thumb is if you would not use the source for the basis of a raise or promotion, don't use it for class. It's not a good source. Some helpful hints on participation. Use paragraphs and white spacing. Makes it much easier to read and follow. Support your experience and your opinions with sources. Be sure citations and references match. Focus on content. What is the content of the discussion? And especially for engagement postings, avoid being too conversational, talking about what you think, what you believe, what you feel, what you like, what you don't like. Try to be focused on the content. Using sources can help you with participation postings, especially the engagement postings, to make them that they go beyond opinion and experience. You all know this. Initial postings are due Thursday by 11:59 p.m. and engagement postings and assignments are due by Sunday at 11:59 p.m. Substantive. This is for both papers and participation. Provide depths and details, examples and explanations, insights and information, compare and contrast, apply and analyze. Make sure you are giving me or demonstrating to me that you are understanding course concepts. And you do not do that by telling me what's in the textbook or telling me what's in an article. Just in case you need this, textbook citation for this class is Cornelissen. I think that's how you say it, 2017. If you happen to have two authors on a textbook like Green and Black, you have to use both their names every time. You add the page or paragraph number for quotes to the citation. I've given you the correct textbook reference. Be sure references are listed alphabetically. They're not listed in the order used. They're listed alphabetically by last name. And if by any chance, I just gave you the example of Green and Black, you would not change that to Black and Green. It's alphabetical by the way it's listed on the published work. If there is no date on the source, you do not use the download date. You use N.D., which stands for no date. Best practice, read the paper aloud before submitting. If you read a paper to yourself, you read what you believe you wrote. If you read the paper aloud, you'll read what you actually wrote. You will pick up on mistakes. You will pick up on redundancies. You will pick up on things that are not clear. Be sure that you compare your paper to the rubric before submitting the paper. Do not just read the directions in the learning modules. The rubric is how you're being graded, so make sure you have followed the rubric. Okay, this was from the rubric for the Module 1 paper. It said 3 critical elements must be addressed specifically: informed decision-making, stance clarification, and corporate literacy. Unfortunately, a lot of people only addressed what social media is and internal and external uses of social media and did not incorporate informed decision-making, stance clarification, or corporate literacy. And in some instances, people wrote one sentence with those words in it, but that to me is not specifically addressing it. And from the rubric here, you actually have the definitions that were provided. In the Module 1 announcement, it said review assignment rubric to be sure you addressed all requirements. There are 3 critical elements that must be addressed in detail, and here they are. Make sure that you use each of the required headings or required elements as a heading. That will ensure a couple of things for you. First of all, it will ensure that you cover all of the requirements. And secondly, you've actually outlined the paper for yourself. So if you start with the headings, you can then fill it in. These are the headings that I would have suggested for the first paper: social media, informed decision-making, stance clarification, corporate literacy, and conclusion. Social media would have been my introductory to establish context, and of course you end with a conclusion. All of these headings would be centered and main headings. Starting with the second heading, they're supposed to be bolded. But I think if you start with the headings, that will help you do a complete paper. In writing, avoid superlatives: every, all, never, always. They are rarely true and difficult to prove. You cannot speak for everyone in the world. You just don't know it. You don't know that everyone in the company would understand a message. You cannot say the company will always do it this way. You can't predict the future. So be really careful. Superlatives really are not needed at all. Be clear and concise. Use the word and rather than as well as, and also, and even. Double connecting words are unnecessary. Since should be used rather than due to the fact that. To should be used rather than in order to. Today should be used rather than in today's era or in this day and age. Very is an overused and unnecessary word. If something is important, it does not become any more important if you put very in front of it. If it's critical, it doesn't become any more critical if you put very in front of it. And the one that always makes me laugh is unique. Unique means there's nothing else like it. So what does very unique mean? Avoid unnecessary adjectives. The one that I see most frequently is great. This is a great idea. This is a great tool. This is a great way to approach this. Great is sort of an evaluative adjective, and it really doesn't say anything. Same with fantastic. Rather than using great, say something is effective or relevant. Add page numbers to your paper. They're usually in the upper left-hand corner. You do not use first person, you, your, or contractions in APA. The easiest way around first person is to just reformat the sentence. Rather than say, my goals are, you would say, the goals are. Avoid starting sentences with also, using it in the first sentence in a paragraph and using it more than once in a paragraph. Cliches. These are expressions that basically we all understand, but they add absolutely no value to your paper. We use it all the time in speaking, but try to avoid it in formal writing. To name a few, public eye, at hand, first and foremost. With that said, well and good. One of the ones I read this morning was swept the world. Social media has swept the world. Those are the kinds of phrases that you would avoid. This is just something that might help some of you, those of you who tend to write a citation after every single sentence. It gets a little cumbersome. So one of the things you might want to do is say, rather than citation after every sentence, start the paragraph with according to, and listen, say what you have to say, write everything you need to say, and end with a citation. That way what you're saying is everything in this paragraph is from this source, and you don't need to put the reference or the citation after every sentence. If you use a source that predicts something will happen in 2017, why not update the information to tell us what has happened? Was the prediction true? We're in 2019. Don't write a sentence talking about what will happen in 2017. Stakeholders. There seemed to be a little bit of confusion on stakeholders, and I know this week's discussion is on stakeholders, and we're going to be doing a lot with stakeholders moving forward. Internal stakeholders are employees, managers, board of directors, and private owners. That's it. External stakeholders might be the stockholders or investors. It could be customers. It could be suppliers. It could be the community. It could be society at large. It could be the general public, government, creditors, contractors, partners. So external has a lot more stakeholders. The challenge, of course, with external stakeholders is they have very different needs. Customers and government don't necessarily want the same information. So it's important to understand all the different stakeholders. Now, some people wrote this week that customers and stakeholders. That doesn't make sense. Customers are stakeholders. Or they wrote employees and stakeholders. Employees are stakeholders. So either say internal stakeholders, external stakeholders, but don't just name one and then say stakeholders as a general comment. Okay, discussion board 2. Internal. You're going to identify the internal stakeholders at the selected company, which I basically just did for you. Explain why stakeholders are important and provide examples of communication. You are basically doing the exact same thing with the external. You're identifying the external stakeholders at your company, explain why they're important, and provide examples. And certainly the previous slide could help you with that. Internal and external stakeholders have different needs. Employees and customers don't care about the same things. Management and investors may not care about the same things. The board of directors and the community may not care about the same things. You have to post a separate thread for internal and external. For your engagement postings, you need one external response and one internal response. And if you respond to any of my questions, that counts towards one of your 2 required engagement postings. I just also wanted to spend a little bit of time on critical thinking because it is one of the parameters in all of your discussion boards, and it also is included in your paper. So I wanted to go over what critical thinking is. It is not just regular thinking. It's thinking deeper. It's looking at problem solving, evaluating, reasoning. Children enter school as question marks and they come out as periods. Try to go back to being a period. Question things rather than just give me what you read, what the book stated, what an article stated. Hopefully you see different things here. On the left, what you should be able to see is a face and the word liar. On the right, you should be able to see actually three faces. There's a young woman whose sort of chin is facing us, an old woman where the young woman's chin becomes her nose, and an old man who the head of the old woman becomes the nose of the old man. So the message is that we don't all always see the same things. And just because you see it doesn't mean everybody else sees it the same way. So some of the problem solving and critical thinking skills. What are the critical issues? What are similarities and differences? One of the most important things in critical thinking is to understand what information is relevant. Not all information is relevant. Not everything on Google is relevant. Not everything on Google is unbiased. So you need to find the good information. Oh, come on. Sorry about that. My phone keeps ringing. Formulate questions, see patterns, explore ideas. Frame the problem correctly. Develop different solutions. Gather relevant data. Draw conclusions. Make recommendations. Know your own assumptions. Know the difference between a fact and an opinion. Understand what your own biases are. Are you stereotyping? I can't remember, was this class or another class, somebody this week wrote something about old people don't use social media. Well, by every definition you can find, I'm an old people and I use social media constantly. So don't stereotype. Consider what are your own biases? What emotions are you putting into things? All right, so this next thing is which one is different? Is it A? Is it B? Is it C? Or is it D? Think of your answer. B is the only one with straight lines. C is the only one that's asymmetrical. D is the only one with curved and straight lines. A is the only one with no points. So is there an answer? If you use critical thinking, you would say they're all different. If you're just looking at it, you might say A is different or B is different. That's what critical thinking is about, is looking at different ways of looking at things, looking at patterns. Some of the critical thinking skills: analyze, probe, synthesize, assess, discuss, apply, question, create, infer, adapt, prioritize, approve or disapprove. It's okay to disagree, just give a reason why. Persuade, compare, contrast, integrate, evaluate, shift paradigms, look at things differently. If you're not prepared to be wrong, you can't be creative. We're all born creative, but we grow out of it because we've become periods rather than question marks. All right, so critical thinking skills. How do you keep a fish from smelling? There may be several different ways. Cook as soon as you catch it, freeze it, wrap it well, leave it in the water, cut off its nose. If you have one idea, you're not using critical thinking skills. So think beyond the obvious. All right, so this is something that comes out of a book called Getting to Yes, which is a book on negotiation skill. So that was written several years ago by a couple of people out of the Harvard Negotiations Project. Two people want an orange. Each insists they needed to get it done. There's only one orange. You can't cut it in half because they both say they need the whole thing. You need to help them solve the problem. So you don't want to solve the problem, but you want to help them solve the problem. The most important thing you can do to solve problems is to ask good questions. In this case, the good question might be, how are you going to use the orange? Because if you ask them their position, one's going to say, I need the pulp, one's going to say, I need the rind. Therefore, both could use the orange because they don't need it for the same purpose. They need different parts of the orange. But what we tend to do in negotiations is we tend to polarize. I need the whole orange. I need the whole orange. This is relatively simple. Turn VII into 8 with a single line. Well, you add one more number 1 Roman numeral and you turn it into 8. This one's a little more challenging. Turn IX into 6 with a single line. I'll let you think about that one for a second. It doesn't say anything about being a straight line. It doesn't say anything about Roman numerals. So what you need to do is you need to just put an S in front of IX. It's one line, and it becomes the word 6. A man's error are his portals of discovery. It is through our mistakes that we tend to learn more. If you hit the target every time, the target is either too big or too near. This is out of a book, and I put this in, and now I'm thinking maybe it's not something I really want to use, but I'm going to talk about a couple of things. When you are working on something, the more you have a stake in it, the more likely you are to produce a good outcome. If you are trying to get inspired to do something differently, think about what irritations you have and turn those into inspiration. Another way of saying that is necessity is the mother of invention. And don't wait for things to happen, make it happen. Intelligence is diverse, dynamic, and distinct. We look at intelligence in many different ways. So, improving critical thinking. Ask good questions and question your assumptions. Understand your own thinking. Heuristics means shortcuts. What shortcuts do you take to get work done so that you're avoiding critical thinking? What are your own biases? Reverse your thinking. If X equals Y, try Y equals X. It's kind of using the chicken and the egg analogy. Evaluate existing evidence and the source of the evidence. Is the source an unbiased source, or is it someone who has a point of view to extol? Think of yourself, think for yourself, and ask tough questions and develop insightful conclusions. There's a difference between a summary and a conclusion. At a graduate level, you should be moving from summary to conclusion. A summary reviews main points. A conclusion explains or interprets points. A summary focuses on the surface. A conclusion goes deeper. Summary repeats information. A conclusion examines it. A summary repeats thoughts. A conclusion offers closing thoughts. State facts versus implications. Discuss current situation or apply it to other situations. Report or persuade. Focus your learning on your entire being. This picture is supposed to represent head, heart, and soul. The most pathetic person in the world is someone who has sight but no vision. That's from Helen Keller, which I think is a wonderful quote. If you have a problem, let me know immediately. Don't wait till the end of the week. If it's earlier in the week, we might be able to work out a better solution for you. So let me know immediately. In advance is a reason, after the fact is an excuse. Word to the wise. It's better to submit assignments late than not submit, because it's easier to keep up than catch up. If you have any questions, please post your question in general questions, or please send me an email. Thanks for listening.